Analog versus digital. Now you're already freaking out, like I just said, I want to put pineapples on pizza because we've got some diehards on both sides of this debate. But it's important to talk about because I think both sides are selling the other one short and kind of inflating the game of what's so important. But I've got one key insight that I want to drop a little bit later on that I think is going to revolutionize how you frame and which ones you use. So, first of all, let's just talk about the basics. The thing that everyone knows that you probably know as well, but we just need to lay out this basic information. I'm Robert Monroe. I'm a performer, musician. I do all the things. Currently, right now, I'm in a hotel room in New Jersey, going to Long Island today to play a gig. Do all sorts of genres, been playing acoustic piano for all my life, and do lots of keyboards, lots of synths, stuff like that. So, first of all, we've got digital. Digital is incredible, right? You've got, and when I say digital, what I'm talking about is anything using computer chips to make the sound, right? So synthesizers, you could have samplers, whatever. As long as it's coming out of a speaker and the way that it got to that speaker is some form of digital production, right? Computer chips. That's what I'm talking about. Digital is amazing because it's lightweight, it's extremely versatile, it's extremely powerful. I can sound like a million instruments from one keyboard. Amazing, right? I have super flexibility. I can change the sound at will. I have certain control parameters that are not possible on analog instruments without some crazy, crazy tweaking, right? Like bending notes on a piano. Amazing, right? What are some of the downsides? Well, have you noticed it doesn't always sound right? And then also the fullness. It doesn't really get the fullness in there. We're going to dive into that in just a second. Let's go over to analog. Let's talk about that. What do I mean by analog? Basically everything that isn't digital. So things that create their sound using the physical universe. So this doesn't necessarily mean electronics are not involved. For example, a Fender Rhodes is a great example of an analog instrument that is still using electronics. But the way it's using electronics is for amplification, right? And that's inevitable. I don't think you can avoid amplification in the modern world. A purist may be sure you're just going to play in smaller halls or acoustically designed halls. We're not talking about that. We're talking about how the sound is produced to begin with. Amplification is a whole nother can of worms. So analog instruments, we got acoustic piano, we got electric guitar, we got drum set, acoustic drums, of course, bass, wind instruments, right? Violin, all these different things. All of these instruments are effectively using a analog way, a physical way to create a sound wave and then capturing that sound wave into an electrical signal via a transducer and then turning it back into a bigger sound wave for amplification in a speaker, right? Now, these methods tend to sound much more sophisticated and full and complex and satisfying right away. What is going on here? Why do we have these physical analog instruments that suck in so many ways? They're super heavy. They're super, efficiency. Sorry, my brain is not working for a second. They are super hard to maintain, right? Because you have to tune them, you have to care for them. They break down because they typically are a bunch of parts put together by somebody 50, 70, 100 years ago. Why they have all of these detriments and yet they still sound so incredible compared to these digital things that we've created recently. Why is that? Why do we have this dichotomy where digital is so easy to use and so versatile, yet it pales to comparison at even some of the most primitive analog physical instruments? I'm going to break it down for you right now. We don't have to wait any longer. Here's the goods. The reason why is there are so many intricacies to how sound is produced And a lot of that is actually what we would generally call as a defect, right? So if you think about image generation pre-AI, it was very clean. And I would say even these early generation of AI images, they're still very clean. What do I mean by that? It's giving you exactly what you're asking it because it's a computer. It's just thinking about what you asked it. So you say, hey, I want a tree, right? There's some trees out here right now. If you say, hey, I want a tree to look like this tree, it's just going to make a tree. And at the beginning, maybe it just goes straight up, one branch here, one branch here. It just looks awful, right? Because it's not as complicated as this tree out here in nature. Everything natural has this extreme complication to it, or noise, right? It's all of these different warp things, and it's dirty and messy. Those all translate to our human ears as being authentic. That's really what's going on. I hate a lot of those words, organic, authentic, because we don't really know what they mean. And then we say them in a way to cover up the fact that we don't really know what they mean. But let me give you what I think they mean, which is there's this noise, this extra color, this extra flavor. Now, here's the crazy thing. Even if you take an analog instrument and you completely cut off all noise coming from it naturally, and then you put it through a speaker, it doesn't sound as good. Think about drums in a drum shield, right? You put it in a drum shield, you cover it up entirely, soundproof it entirely, and then you hear it just from a speaker. Why? Well, that brings me to the second thing, which is the omnidirectionalness, the complicatedness of how sound is produced and sent out. So when you have an acoustic piano, the sound is coming out of everywhere. By the way, this is actually true of some amplified instruments as well. A guitar, when it goes through a guitar amp, the sound is not just coming from the front of the guitar amp. It's coming from all around the guitar amp. And it's bouncing off here, bouncing off there, bouncing off over there. All of this creates complexity. I think humans desire that complexity. And when we're robbed of it, we know something's missing and it's driving us crazy. Okay, to wrap this up, to make this not go so long, how do we use then digital versus analog? I would say it's a matter of convenience and control. Let me explain that a little bit more. Convenience. I am on tour right now. If a venue has an acoustic piano or a Hammond in their possession, I'm going to play it because it's going to infinitely sound better. It's going to feel better to me. It's amazing, right? Now, there's even caveats there. Let's say they mic the piano poorly. It's picking up a lot of the other instruments. It can't be present. It can't be loud. Maybe I still don't want to play the piano at that point because the simplicity and the convenience of being able to just send a cable out, have that cleanness of signal, that may be more valuable. So the convenience piece is very important. I personally tend to want to do analog instruments if it's convenient enough, right? Just, it's kind of a matter of preference, as I'm sure you know all this stuff is. The second part of this is basically control, right? When you have digital, you have full control, but that full control is a double-edged sword because you may go, oh, I can adapt all these different things. But what you don't understand is you may be breaking laws of natural sound. And I'm not saying that there's anything sacred about that, but the thing is, humans are very good at kind of having this uncanny, you see an AI face and you're like, that looks really good these days, but there's still something wrong with it. And, you watch like guys like the Corridor Crew and they talk about like the little muscles in your face and the skin, the little like translucent layers of your skin. All of that affects our ability to say, that's fake. It's the same with sound. When you hear an acoustic piano sound created by a keyboard, your brain is going through all these things, the release, the string noise, all of these things trigger your brain to go, that's not a real piano. Where do we want to use digital then? It's when we want to have convenience and control. When do we want to use analog? I would say all the other times if that's your sound aesthetic. Now, some people, they didn't grow up playing the piano, they didn't grow up doing as much analog, and they love that digital sound. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to be aware you're kind of having to do more work with anything digital to get past that uncanny barrier. I hope this was informative. I hope this was interesting to you. I'm Robert Monroe. I'd love for you to subscribe and follow. Give me comments. What do you think about the digital versus analog? Do you prefer one versus the other? Let me know. And until then, have a great day and practice away.